tremendous idea, Aliyu, like you mentioned. And in terms of qualifications and growth, everybody assumes I'm either an engineer, an architect, or a quantity surveyor. And I really hate to kind of disappoint everyone, but I'm not. My background is in economics, and then finance, and then development. And really early in my career, actually, I was envisioning a life in kind of Ministry of Finance or some kind of development agency. So it brings to the question of how did I fall into Urban Shelter? And I think this is where I confess to the fact that Urban Shelter is a close to 40-year company. So it's what I call one of the dinosaurs in the real estate industry in Abuja. Even though it's very young, it's actually one of the very first organized real estate development firms. It's a family-run business, and we are now in the third generation. So I'm part of the third generation of real estate development. It's what we live, breathe, eat. It's what I hear even when I was quite a young child. It's what gets discussed at the tables and what gets discussed at birthday parties. So it's very much, I think, part of my blood. Although at the very early stages, I was determined to not be part of this. But when you are building a legacy, I think it then became important to say, where do you lend yourself into this structure? Urban Shelter, like I said, is close to 40 years now. What makes it really exciting is we are busy on about 15, 16, 17 projects across the country. We are live in Abuja, Lagos, Kaduna State, as well as Niger State. And the next time you and I have a chat, hopefully next year, March, on IWD, I hope to also be in Enugu and Kano. We have a 300-man-woman team. I'm delighted to be part of this amazing group of people that come in and turn up every day, trying to change lives by providing housing, by providing commercial spaces and retail spaces for people to start up their businesses. So in a nutshell, I think that's what Urban Shelter is. What also makes us unique is we don't have just the one product. So what I call our unofficial theme is that whatever your budget, there will be some kind of real estate asset for you. We have asset classes all the way from about 2 million to about 2 billion. So there's something in there that will fit you so long as you walk through our doors. We have residential products that are just 30 units, and then we have commercial market that is over 4,000 shops. So we're busy, especially in this kind of economy, but it's still the best thing that I like to do. I'm really happy to be, we feel really humbled and privileged to be at the forefront of this company speaking to you about it. It's a lot of smoke screen magic and of course God's intervention. I think like most women, we are very good at multitasking. We are very analytical, and I think that places us in a very special place to be able to wear multiple hats. I describe it as being my day job is Urban Shelter. That's my bread and butter. It's what I do day to day. I'll start backwards actually. NESG, Nigeria Economic Center Group, is it's an organization I'm incredibly proud to be part of. It is a independent, private sector-led advocacy group that is essentially a think tank. I would actually say that the biggest think tank in Nigeria, providing a platform for dialogue, for advocacy between public sector and private sector, and just kind of trying to bridge that gap. In that, there are now currently 6 commissions under NESG, and those commissions range from things like Education Policy Commission to Health Policy Commission. I'm fortunate enough to oversee the Infrastructure Policy Commission, which also handles ports and inland waterways, water sanitation, housing and real estate development, railways, roads, and aviation. So it's a very big policy commission, and I'm excited to be part of it. The technical working group, we were called in for, I believe, 6 months to 1 year, and this was towards the very tail end of 2020 to work on a draft of part of the recovery of the economy. That to a huge extent, I think we've wrapped up. We get called in from time to time just for revisions. And then back now to my absolute passion. So Urban Shelter, I think no 2 days are alike, and I'd say it's the most challenging role I've played, but it's still the best job I've ever had. Even on my worst day, I think it's the best job I've ever had, and I probably will ever have. Because I get to see things grow. I get to see, families that are making their final payment towards a 1-bedroom flat, new couples. I get to see families that are, moving their 4 children into their 4-bedroom flat. I get to see people retiring and trying to downsize into a bungalow in Kaduna State. I get to see in an economy like this, especially women actually setting up their small, medium enterprise businesses by acquiring shops from us or offices from us. It gives me great pleasure to know I'm part of, in a way, I think society's growth, whether it's growing families or growing businesses. And a typical day can range from coming in to kind of address meetings. It could be interviews like this, which I do quite a bit of. It could be meetings. A significant amount of my time is spent on what I call pre-development. So by the time you see projects growing, essentially, I always associate real estate and construction with farming. It's a 1 year, 2 year, maybe 3 year process. You're kind of sowing the seeds, that's the foundation. You're nurturing it, that's the project development part of it, and then you're watching it grow, and that's the final house or the final product, whether it's maize or rice that you then kind of go and cultivate. In our case, if we hand over. So it can be a slow process, but what takes a great deal of my time is pre-development. Pre-development is everything from going to, value the land, look at the land, negotiate in terms of with the landowners. If it's not our particular property, it might be reaching out to JV partners that are what I call public sector, so they're government-owned properties. It's the proposal side of things, the commercial side of things, the agreements, the financial projections. What gets me really excited, actually, even though I'm not an architect, is the designs, the drawings, the floor plans, how to move things around and watch it take shape, the 3D modeling. The decision-making process, essentially, that goes towards saying, is a project a go or a no-go, takes a great deal of my time, and I'm very happy with it, because for me it's actually really exciting. And the process can be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be 1 year. There are projects that started conceiving 5 years ago that are now only taking shape this year, because, as we say, God's time is best time. In this situation, there tends to be Nigeria's time is kind of when Nigeria pushes you to move. Whereas others have a very short gestation period. They come in and they come really quickly, and they move, and kind of the stars align, and then you just move with it. So that's a chunk of it. Other things that are not day-to-day, week-to-week, would be monitoring projects, kind of looking at the quality monitoring side of things. What I call month-to-month would be more of the R&D side of things, what's happening globally in the real estate sphere, whether it's AI in marketing or whether it's innovation in building. For instance, we're keeping an eye on things like 3D buildings and so on and so forth. So that's kind of a month-to-month. Quarterly or every 6 months, it's to look at what our costs do and how is it affecting our construction. What's the Nigerian economy outlook look like? How's the macroeconomy going to affect some of our figures, some of our procurement plans, some of our supply chain issues? If a war is happening in Ukraine, which it is that going to impact us? What is annually you look at things like what's geopolitics of whether West Africa, we all know, for instance, Mali, Niger, and what's the other third country they've ceded out of ECOWAS? Does that affect the construction industry? So those are the kind of things we also monitor in terms of research. But day-to-day really does differ. Day-to-day differs. So the ability to, I think, be flexible, to jump in there, to get your hand, quote unquote, dirty, to be able to address issues as and when they arrive, I think it's very important. I have to say, though, it has to be underscored by an overlying a mission, a vision, a strategy, a dream, essentially, as to where you're trying to get your company with. That helps. I know I didn't give a one cookie cutter answer, but because this life, unfortunately, is not just one in this box in a cookie cutter shape. So, I mean, clearly this is something really close to my heart. One, I'm a woman. Two, I'm in a position of leadership to be able to affect a level of change. And then I am in this industry. So I think let's set the scene. When we talk about gender diversity in the workplace, we're talking about men and women being hired at equal pace, at equal consistency, that pay and remuneration is also matched and equal, that we're giving the same access to resources, promotions and pay, and so on and so forth. So once we agree that gender diversity is having equal opportunities, and we've identified that actually, is it happening or is it not happening in the construction industry? And we know that for the construction industry, it's been synonymous with kind of these stereotypes. It's brawny, strong men, it's hard hats, it's heavy machinery, predominantly a male workforce, deeply ingrained types of stereotypes, almost constantly associated with having physical strength, which we assume women have less physical strength and competence. And despite advancements, I think, in gender equality or equity in other various fields, for instance, we don't get this in the legal profession. I think also the medical profession is really being kind of mitigated. Women really do remain significantly underrepresented in the industry, and we're facing numerous barriers and lack of advancement in the sector. When you speak of in terms of how do we support, what kind of role we can all play, and I like how you said everybody, you kind of listed everyone from clients, stakeholders to public policy and so on and so forth. I think, we have a role to play in supporting women and making construction industry more inclusive. And I know we speak of the word inclusivity a lot, but this really applies to the situation. And I can think of actually a number of ways, and because some of these we've used it at our Shelter and we've seen the kind of positive effects of it. Increasing the scope of recruitment, employers should and must commit to gender equity and diversity when advertising for jobs. So the biases when advertising have to be very careful. If you're asking for certain things, we need to know that when you're interviewing, you ensure that instead of getting 10 CVs of men, that you have at least 4 out of those 10 CVs are women. Go back to the HR and say, look for more women. It's not that they're not there. Women also, we need to be encouraged. A lot of women, when we're going for jobs, we think we have to match every single thing. So they ask for 10 years and a PhD, and you've only just started your PhD and you have 9 years, you won't apply. Meanwhile, a man with a diploma that has 1 year will actually apply for that job. So I think being encouraged also is very important. At very early stages as well, something very simple that we notice when we're trying to do graduate recruitment a while back, we noticed there's an imbalance even from secondary schools all the way to university, where girls are just not encouraged in STEM, or let me not use the word encouraged because I don't necessarily mean that they're being denied, but that there isn't an open space that allows for girls and women to enter the STEM spaces, so that at secondary school they're taking chemistry, physics and science, mathematics and advanced maths. By the time they get to university, okay, it's actually quite common. It should be commonplace to see women studying electrical, mechanical, structural engineering. So now I'm going back towards even the root of it, so that by the time we go out of the university, there is a pool of women then to start recruiting from. And this is now going even the responsibility of education systems, and so that's state and federal government as well. For us in the industry, I think we have to be more cognizant about creating a safe environment for everyone. So an environment that promotes that sense of safety and inclusivity. Something very basic we found is women, we have tops and we have bottoms. So PPE, for instance, construction equipment, protective gear is very much male gendered. I can never cover mine across my chest or across my hips because men don't have hips. So something as basic as ensuring that protective wear actually fits women, I think it's so basic but so important. The material should be durable, but they should also be able to actually fit us to be able to secure our safety. Benefits that encourage women to achieve their life goals and remove barriers are absolutely essential. The very basics of allowing for maternity leave, flexible work hours, and just to remove the stigma that somehow motherhood means you cannot come back to your workplace and continue where you kept off, or even advance yourself. I think we need to remove that stigma. Essentially, we're looking at an attitudinal change that means job site culture is just being reevaluated, that there is a constant change in our mindset about what women can and cannot do at job sites. So I would say, speak to this to say managers can also increase safety for all workers. You can allocate team assignments to ensure women are included. You can create open door policy for better dialogue. Something we came across a few years back, women didn't want to stay past a certain hour, and it's because of one or two things. Job sites were not well lit, so just more lighting, CCTV for safety, and then something as basic as toilets. If you are going through, for instance, that time of the month, you want a toilet where you can change without having to run into men. Very small, very basic, but things that really we found actually can really promote more women into the industry. I think I probably will stop here and allow for questions in case I've gone and covered other questions. I think it might be easier actually if I use the cheat code for Urban Shelter, because I think that's probably the best example I can use and say, how do we build upon that and where perhaps we've gotten it right and where we've gotten it wrong. And I'll just kind of mention a few basic statistics. And thank you for putting me on the spot to say not just team members, but leadership as well, because that's very important. Sometimes we hide behind the team. So our workforce entirely, actually, we're slightly leaning more towards women than men. We have about 56% more women than work. And you're right, unfortunately, and that's tended to be a trap as we grow up through higher ranks. You have 35-40% are women against men. Interestingly, our board is 70% women-led, and I'm really happy about that because, again, there's the intentionality to say, how do we create more diversity? How do we get more women in the pool? And it's not an overnight thing. A quick kind of reversion back to my history. I came on as a COO in 2015, and then I was promoted to managing director, I believe, in 2019. So this is a 10-year, 2015 to 2020. So this is a 10-year process of a consistency and intentionality to say we are going to look at how best to create an enabling environment for women to thrive. how do we become more intentional about having more women in teams and then in leadership positions? It wasn't that we woke up and said, just hire more women, because actually at the end of the day, was this going to be detrimental or advantage to the company? So back to this, excuse me. So at the board level, we're doing more than fantastic. We're at 70. Leadership level, we have pushed, and actually one thing I'm incredibly proud of is the person that leads the entire project development, project management, project delivery, project handover of the 4 states that I mentioned earlier, of the 17 projects that I mentioned earlier, is a woman. So the person that handles all projects in entirety, that's construction, is a lady, amazing lady. And how did we grow her in this role? She didn't start off, her background actually was a QS. We noticed she was a fantastic QS. And we noticed actually generally in urban shelter, the QS members tend to make very good project managers. It might be because QS as a discipline, as a profession, has a lot to do with figures, with cost control. And for me, you may well argue, but actually construction is as much a finance issue as it is a bricks and mortar issue. So she grew the ranks there. She handled 1 project, 2 projects. Then she handled a region of projects. Then we realized actually she produced, I'm not allowed to say this, but she produced one of the best quality projects we had about 7, 8 years ago. And that really brought us to attention. We had more engagement with her. We put her on a track of leadership and mentorship. Leadership and mentorship. And that's where she got to how she is. Now, that's one case in point. What we also did though is, I perhaps mentioned this earlier, is to say whenever we're doing recruitment is to ensure we have a good number of women as part of interviews, as part of CVs. We also look at something called the blind promotions, so that we might miss out names when it comes to promotions, and you're just looking at what the KPIs are being achieved. It kind of removes some of those biases to ensure that everybody's being promoted for what they're bringing to the table, rather than because they're gender or lack of. It looks at just looking at teams as well. 2-3 years ago, we noticed that one of the engineering units didn't have any women. We said, let's go back to basics. Let's go back to some of the universities and look at what are the departments of the engineering doing. Where are the women there? Where are the top scoring women? And perhaps we should grow them in through from NYSC all the way and mentor them through an urban shelter process, so that we grow them if we're not able to just recruit them, if they're being taken up by other bigger companies, or they've been leaving the country and so on and so forth. And that's actually been quite successful as well. It's still lopsided towards men, but we now have at least women in those particular units. We were intentional about training. We ensured that the training that men get informally, and you'll be surprised, even though it's formally, how important it is. And that can be things like, I'm going to church on Sunday, I'm going to Masala lecture on Friday, and I'll take a group of men with me. The discussions that I've had after Masjid, Masala lecture on Friday, or after church on Sunday by the men folk is beyond just spirituality. They talk about business, they talk about training, they talk about dropping each other's names at opportunities. And we said we should try and do something along those lines. And that's something that's been working in terms of the mentoring, the informal mentoring side of things. And then for training, we looked at a number of leadership programs to fit in 1 or 2 people. At the very basics, we looked at maternity leave. We said, look, okay, maternity leave across industries is 3 months. Let's make ours 4 months. Beyond the 4 months, we introduced another 3 months that was essentially work from home. This year, we also started a 3-day in-office work and 2 days work from home system. Last year, we trialed out 4 days, and with a Friday being work from home, we measured and monitored productivity, and we noticed that there wasn't a dip in productivity. That clearly people are policing themselves. It wasn't that people were home twiddling their thumbs. I actually am really bad at working from home, so I still turn up Monday through Friday, but people are able to multitask, and good luck to them. So those are the kind of, I think, policies that we introduced, so that we could say, look, this would allow mothers to progress, because for mothers, we are the ones that pick up kids from school. We are the ones that think about what the dinner menu is going to be. I'm not necessarily saying, by the way, I agree with this, because I think parents should all be in it together. But whether I like it or not, I have to appreciate that we are living in a fairly patriarchal society. We are living in a society where women have certain roles and men have certain roles. So for urban shelter, that's how we've addressed it. And I think that's what I would encourage every organization to address, despite the peculiarities they have, to actually look at how can they ensure that there are more women. Very simple. If you sit at a meeting and there are 90% men on your table, 10% women as managers, as leaders, we should ask ourselves why, because we're clearly doing something very, very wrong. If we are approving promotions and there are 95% men, we should ask ourselves why. If the training memo says, Demola, Ibrahim, Chooks, we should ask ourselves why Doris, Sadia, and Yinka are not there. I think that those are things that we should hold ourselves accountable. It's a journey. I want to say that it's not a destination. I think there's actually a lot more that we certainly can do at Urban Shelter, but we're on the right track. Thank you. Thank you so much. I have always believed that we need to have men to be allies and advocates. There are spaces you and I cannot go in, will not be able to go in for whatever reason, that we need the man in our lives that happens to know was in that space to mention Sadia's name or to mention your name, to say, oh, I know this lady should be a fantastic minister of investment, please put her in. And just like you said, they are essentially ruling. It will take some time for that tide to change, and so we need them to mention our names. So when you mentioned, when you asked about barriers, there are a number, but I think that I don't want to use the word more obvious. I think the more clear ones would be probably just the gender stereotypes and biases. I think that kind of hinders us in terms of what these barriers are like. I think the opportunities, where there's opportunities all the way far back from education at the very start, being offered, engineering at university, being extra lessons for science and maths at primary and secondary, and then when you eventually get that degree, being considered as an actual candidate for interviews, as an actual candidate for 1 year contract, and then ultimately being transferred cadre as a full-time staff and saying, yeah, okay, yes, you might be a woman, but we see no differences of what you're bringing to the table as your male counterparts. And then I think also workplace harassment and discrimination. We should mention this. It feels frightening to mention, but whether we like it or not, I think women are facing harassment and discrimination in the office. Sadly, this can be physical. Unfortunately, this can be sexual. They can be taken advantage of. The men in our lives need to create that safe space for us to be able to come and say to them, this isn't possible. There have to be clear rules and lines and policies in place to say we will not, offices, public spaces, governments, agencies, we will not tolerate harassment, discrimination, sexual or otherwise, across for women. So I think I hope I mentioned this. So I think those would be the first three. Gender stereotypes is an attitudinal thing that we have to start changing from the very basics. If you have kids, something that really gets me going. Whenever I go shopping, a few years back when I was shopping for my kids, the t-shirts for the girls will have things like, I want to be a princess, or, I want to be a unicorn. I love unicorns. The one for the boys would have things like boss. My niece, years ago, she's a big girl now, finishing secondary school. She was asked to dress as her mentor, and she wanted to wear a suit to represent us anti-Sadia vaccine. And we couldn't find a suit for a girl. We bought her from the boys section a suit for her to wear so that she could be what she wanted to be. So these kind of micro underrepresentation, these kind of micro gender stereotyping, which actually, again, isn't necessarily specific to the construction industry. There are things we need to take note of and try and raise our voices, amplify our voices to speak up against. When you talk about turning things around, I agree with you entirely. The issue of International Women's Day, which should be an everyday thing, advocating for women, advancing for women's rights, isn't a purely women's issue. It's a human issue, which means men and women together actually coming together, society as a whole, saying we're not encouraging half of our population to reach their full potential. So therefore, we also need to speak up. And so that I'm talking to the men now to say, please speak up. And it speaks to what I mentioned earlier, that if you're in a meeting and there are all men, go and ask for more women. If you are in a study space and there are all men, again, ask why that is, check why that space is. I do it now. Once in a while, if I have 3 heads of HOUs that are all men, I say, actually, have a representative that is a woman, come and sit for you. This is the only way that we can grow our team. By the way, the response sometimes is, oh, I don't think she has the capacity. And I say, well, if you never start her off, day 1, ground 0 today, she will never have the capacity. So the day 1 she joins that meeting, she may not have the capacity. But by 6 months into her representing the HOU or the general manager or the AGM, I can assure you she will have that capacity. And that's just how you build up. So efforts to turn this kind of situation around would be just to attract and retain more women in construction by talking about some of the strategies you mentioned earlier to say, what policies specifically are women looking for? Is it flexible working hours that allows them to, so long as they work 40 hours within the week, regardless of whether it's a 9 to 5, they've actually met their quota. If you've given them KPI, whether or not they hand it over on a Monday or a Friday, they've met their KPI. You don't have to see them visible in the office. If it's construction and you've given them a milestone to reach foundation, she's reached foundation, that she's achieved it. That she did it in 1 week in the 2 weeks you gave her means she has that extra week off, and so on and so forth. We talked about the second one I would say is advocating and promoting the importance of creating inclusive work environments. Inclusive work environments means having the space to changing rooms, toilets, facilities to feel safe as a woman. It's creating areas that would allow for women to flourish in their best self rather than for us to try and say we're competing for the men. A very basic but very important one is actually just promoting and career advancement, so that whether you do it blindly, you don't say, well, she's a woman, I'm going to completely discount her immediately. This can't work. It's to say, look, we're looking for skills, that skills match. Perhaps it's for us to see how best we support her to be the best manager, board member, leader that she can be. Thanks very much. I think as a concept is a fantastic idea. At the same time, when I look at, for instance, and sorry to keep using Urban Shelter example, but perhaps because I'm in this space. Urban Shelter, we have both for our procurement process and for our contracting process. I should explain, as a real estate company, we don't do direct construction. We hire construction firms to do the actual building. We provide project management, supervision, monitoring. We monitor quality assurance, and then also hand over interface with marketing and sales and so on and so forth. So for the sales and procurement side of things, so both for procurement and for contracting, we have something called a tender board system. And it feels a bit like a local government thing, but we have a tender board system which I'm not allowed to be on, so that I cannot influence decisions. And it's a mix of 7 men and women from different units of Urban Shelter to look at proposals for supplies and proposals for contracts. It's a kind of a blind process, and part of it is to create this equal playing field. So I like affirmative procurement, but we're doing it the other way around, where we don't have any option but to do it blind. We don't know whether the person coming is going to be a woman, a man, A, B, and C, and so on and so forth. And part of it is actually, we did it, I want to say that we did it because of affirmative action. I confess that it wasn't. We did it so that, for instance, I don't know, my brother won't come and kind of get a job. My husband won't kind of come and get a big contracting job. We did it because we wanted to promote quality as best as possible, to promote competitiveness as best as possible, and of course, a very transparent process as best as possible. And we've been able to achieve all three. But in achieving those three, it also turns out we actually help to advance affirmative procurement. So, and I won't share names now, but one of the biggest suppliers we have at Urban Shelter is a lady. Biggest supplier we have at Urban Shelter is a lady. And I won't see for confidential and information reasons, I won't mention what it is. This lady supplies. Now, did we go looking for a woman? No. But we went with what I call a transparent outlook. And so that enabled that actually this person emerged as the ultimate supplier. Now, if we had gone to say, oh, is this person capable or not capable, actually, we may then have been affected adversely. But I'm glad to say, perhaps because of this kind of structure that we had in place quite early, I think 2015 again, 2014, sorry, was the year before I became CEO, 2014, it allowed for a space for competition to thrive, for transparency to be very open, for a better level playing field for suppliers to come and say, this is what I have. And then Urban Shelter would do a due diligence actually in terms of their capacity. And man or woman, so long as you have the capacity, so long as you have the track record, we will take you on. However, I can advocate definitely for affirmative procurement. The underlying current I want to add is women, when we are called to the table, we should stand up, we should embrace it, and we shouldn't give anything less than 100%. One or two experiences is there is sometimes an expectation that if we give a lady, there is a feeling of, well, I have already been given this because I am a woman, and therefore perhaps there is space for me to underperform. And I think that damages, and by the way, it's a very small percentage. I think, however, that unfortunately then damages women who are working hard actually to change the space, to change the narrative, to ensure that we are excelling in whatever space, but in this particular discussion, it's for procurement. So it's just to caution, I think, against that. but most affirmative actions are completely what the act is, but the obvious one that came to mind, and you mentioned, is a Bureau of Public Procurement. I've never gone through the act, but I know Nigeria, actually, it's not for a lack of policies. It's not for a lack of what I call grand statements. It's not for a lack of strategy. Even though I haven't read it, and after this, I'm not going to go and look for it, by the way. I'm very sure it speaks to, it might not use the word affirmative procurement, but it probably says something along the lines of, transparent process, everybody is, equal footing, and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's that we lack the policy, but I think it's the courage of the leadership at the top to enforce some of these policy points, policy dialogue, policy thrust that are meant to promote better diversity, that are meant to affirm, and this doesn't speak to just women, by the way, it's just any disadvantaged groups. Because Nigeria, we speak 500 dialects. We acknowledge only 3 languages, but actually there are multitudes of smaller, beyond the Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, minorities that will say to you, well, we're also not being given opportunity, just like women are, because affirmative action for me, let me use the word affirmative action so that it covers everything. Affirmative action covers all those groups, and women are inclusive of that, because obviously we have been at a disadvantage at different points over decades long. So I think it has to start with the leadership. I don't think that we needed to introduce more policies to it, but it's the enforcement factor at the top of that leadership to ensure that this is actually happening, that it's an intentional process and not just speaking to a gimmick to say, oh, well, we do this. But if you do this, actually, let's see the results of how you're doing it. It's to ensure, again, you need ministers, you need DGs, you need managing directors, CEOs, that either you say you're doing blind tendering process, and so therefore, whether it's man, woman, or animal, you actually don't know who it is. You're simply doing it based on the best quality service, on the best pricing service, depending on what the matrix is for that RFP. Or if it's not a blind process, then when you get 10 people and it's showing the consistent, again, Mohammed, Ebechukwu, Afolabi, well, you say, well, actually, no. Where are the minority groups? Where are the women? Please go and redo this tender process. I know, for instance, a few years back during the elections, I can't remember whether it's PDP or the other ruling party. Let me just say, one of the political parties, I think, reduced, for instance, the ticket for women to be able to run for office. It might sound small, but it was actually very important. It's important because women tend to earn less. Women will get less money for politics than men. So actually, while it might have seemed like something very jovial, convenient, it was actually a very important, although small, indication of what it means to implement a policy, to say that we want to see more women in political positions. So one of the barriers of entry, finance, we're going to reduce it. On the public policy side of things is perhaps not to also just look at the policy, but to say, why do we not see as many women or disadvantaged people in the space that are going for RFPs and tendering process? If it's a case of fees, remove fees. Maybe you make it all free. If it's a case of documentation, is to say, well, what documentation are essential or not? I have a problem with tendering processes in general. It will ask you to donate your firstborn child and your future grandchildren. So you have to be very careful. If some of the bigger companies like Urban Shelter and perhaps even Inter-Bau are struggling with tender process, well, what do people at the lower end of the ladder look like? So those are the kind of questions I would like the public sector to say to themselves. If we want to do this and we want to be genuine about this, actually, either enforce the policies that are already in place. And if they're not enforceable, why is it? Is it because they're creating too many barriers? And if those are the barriers, what are the 1, 2, 3 identifiable barriers? Can we cut them back? The obvious ones are maybe finance. The second one may be kind of the documentation that are needed. And then the third one might be just the scope of things. Maybe you break up the tendering process and so on and so forth. That'll be my basic suggestion, but I need to look into more. It might be a very unpopular opinion, but I think this probably counts for both men and women. And I think leadership actually for me cuts across, regardless of whether you're a leader in politics, leader in construction, or medicine or anything else. I think they're just some very basic tenets for leadership. And I would suggest that actually at some point they apply. Once COVID came along, I think the word resilience took on a whole new meaning. But I think for Nigerians, resilience as a leader has always been very important. And resilience is just one of this, is almost the ability to adapt, to be very flexible, the ability to see other people's point of view. I think one leadership quality we don't get a lot of actually is very basically maybe to be a storyteller. What that means is you are inspiring people. for people to see your point of view, for people to believe your point of view, for people to feel they want to be part of your point of view, part of your vision. You're inspiring them. They want to achieve that vision, that mission, the objectives that you set in place. You want a leader that's able to have all those interpersonal skills like communication. That speaks to it. You want a leader that has a sense of being an innovator, a pace setter. I always use the example of, most of us started off with the phone from Sony Ericsson or Motorola. But a lack of innovation 20 years later means that they're no longer in that field. You don't want to be the leader that didn't take opportunity at the time that you should have. So innovation and setting a pace, I think, is really important. I believe in leading by example. I think, and that can be difficult sometimes. You cannot ask your team to do something you're not willing to do. And that's very important. You have to be in the trenches with them as it were. Personal traits are things like integrity and credibility. When you say you're going to do something, do it. Teams are looking at you, and if you don't set that tone, then the whole ranks all the way down also begin to fall like dominoes. You can't lead a team that lacks integrity and credibility, but you also cannot lead a team unless you have integrity and credibility. Building trust in teams is important. Building team is also a very big one for me. One of the reasons I struggle with interviews is because you get to see one face, but actually there are 300 of us that are creating innovations. There are 300 of us that are changing Nigeria's skyline one project at a time. I just happen to be the person that's here in front of you. So carrying people along for me is really important, I think, because I think our success lies in our strengths. Leaders, we need to be able to take difficult, tough decisions, even if they are very unpopular. We really should not be afraid to take those decisions. I think that's something that is incredibly important. I remember the Apple CEO saying, "Stay foolish." I don't believe in staying foolish, but I think we should always explore. I think we should be always inquisitive. I think we should always have that mind of what's happening next and how to be part of it. The mentorship and sponsorship goes along with building teams. Something that doesn't sound relevant, but leadership also is knowing when to leave, actually. Leadership is knowing how to plan succession. Is building teams that are as strong as you are, is knowing that there's a time to leave, there's a time to pass on to the next batch of leaders, and a time to move on. So I think that would be, I don't know if that's very concise, I don't know if that's very articulated, but that would be for me what leadership looks like in any space, not just in construction. I think really early in my career, if I wish somebody had told me it was okay to be ambitious. I think women, we try and make ourselves very small. We try to not take up space. We try to minimize our voice and ourselves. And I just wish either someone had told me or someone had created the space for me to be myself, but to actually dream big, to be ambitious. And I don't think women should ever shy away from ambition. I think you should aim high, aim big, aim fast, aim as far as you can, and just keep going, keep running, keep dreaming, keep achieving, bring it every day and just keep trying. I find advice really hard because we're all coming from different starting points and different privileges or lack thereof. So this is hard for me when I'm asked about advice. I think you have to. I started off as an assistant. Whenever I say family business, it's assumed that I started at the top, and I didn't. I started off as an assistant, writing a lot of memos, writing a lot of letters, doing a lot of photocopying. But these are steps you have to take to grow. So my advice for anybody starting is don't be afraid to start from the bottom. A bit like I swim a lot. So when you jump into a pool, your feet first touches the bottom of the pool. Your instinct actually is your feet then bounce and pushes you back up to the top. So it's that rise in you that you have to continue to rise. I think we should also appreciate that growth is never kind of this linear, straight line to the top. There is a lot of U-turns. There is a lot of back and forth. A very quick example, the women in the office get nervous, they're pregnant, and I sit down with them and I say, pregnancy is 9 months. There is a lot you can do work-wise if you want to work throughout that 9 months. It isn't some kind of the end of your life. You might think that maternity is 4 months and it feels like such a long time. Again, you'll be surprised how quickly that time goes and you're back into the office again. Please don't be nervous. And I give my example to myself. 2 of my 4 children were had very much at urban shelter. One of them actually I had a baby as a COO of the office, which was quite interesting. So I would advise everybody to just keep pushing, that life will throw at you many, many different things. For the woman that is on this journey, I pray and hope you have a village around you to support yourself. I had the village of my siblings, the village of my in-laws, and an amazing partner that probably without him, I wouldn't have felt the push to be encouraged. Whenever I have what I call the imposter syndrome, he's somebody that pushes me to look beyond myself, get out of my own way, because sometimes when we can do that, he pushes me to kind of soar and achieve more. So build a village around you that people that encourage you, build mentorship of people that can push you, build sponsorship. Sponsorship, though, is a two-way thing. It shouldn't feel transactional. It's because you build a relationship with somebody, and when opportunities come, they can then push you into that role, as opposed to meet somebody randomly and say, please give me a job. That won't go down well. So please don't be afraid to start at the bottom. Have a trajectory of where you want to go. Don't get sidelined because, I don't know, you got married or you had a baby or the job didn't turn out the way you do. Pivot, have that sense of resilience, get back on the horse and keep moving and keep tracking. Life will throw at you what it may, but have a common vision of where you're trying to get to. I think have a common dream of what you want to achieve, and then make sure you keep daily, weekly, monthly trying to do something to better yourself towards that end goal that you're going to do. And ultimately, sometimes again, it's a journey, not necessarily a final destination. I'm here where I am, but I'm still on the journey. So I'm still on the journey every single day. Another tough one. Women, my sisters, my goodness. Your life is you are born out of purpose. You have purpose in every single way. You come on viral as purpose. You, God's most complicated creation, you have purpose. You have passion in you. You just need to go out and live it. Dream big, take up space, allow your voice to be heard, be loud where and when you need to be. You are valid, you count, you matter, we need you in every single space. If you choose to be in the home, please make it what you wanted to make it. If you dream to take over the world, please by all means let's support you. But women, turn up and turn out. We are a sisterhood, we need you, we count on you. I look forward to supporting women in every single way that I can. But the one thing I can say is wake up in the morning knowing you have purpose. And with that purpose in mind, go out and achieve it by God's will. Thank you.